Welcome back to the Write It Down podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Murata, bringing you one-on-one interviews to challenge, inspire, and encourage. Joining us today is retired Lieutenant Colonel who served 20 plus years as an aviation and acquisition corps officer, John Schmitt. He is now CEO and co-founder of iXpress Genes, which is a PTSD diagnostic test focusing on RNA biomarkers. iXpress Genes is a simple blood test that can inform clinicians of inflammation and cellular stress caused by PTSD. I'm super excited to host John, and I'm excited to share more about what iXpress Genes can mean for you. You know what to do. Sit back, relax, and get your pens ready because this is Write It Down. Welcome back to the Write It Down podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Murata, on the mic with co-founder and CEO of iXpress Genes, John Schmitt. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thanks so much for having me, Brooke. Thank you.
I see behind you, you have a lot of honorary mentions and medals back there, and I want to touch base a little bit as we go into this interview on your experience in the military. I know that that's a huge background of how you launched even into iXpress Genes, and I introduced you as the co-founder and CEO, but there's many other accolades and many other missions that you've been a part of. So why don't you capture a little bit for our audience where you've been and how you got here?
Yeah, I think I think it's hard to draw a straight line. So I grew up in California, and I was went to UC Davis in California, degree in biology. Needed money to pay for school, and of course this is before 9/11, and my brother had served, and this sounded like a great deal, and you need college to get paid for. So I actually graduated from UC Davis. I was a Black Hawk pilot, and then 9/11 happened, and then spent had two tours in Iraq, and then I got picked up to go teach at West Point. But in order to do that, I had to go get a advanced degree. And I hadn't been back to school, and I couldn't really figure out a place. And I ended up finding a program of microbiology and immunology at Vanderbilt Medical Center. And I ended up getting that degree. I never thought I would use it. It was really exciting. It was really interesting to me, but never thought I'd use it. And I went on to teach. And then I spent the last like 10 years or so in the Army doing weapon system acquisition. So kind of the business side of weapon procurement, which actually helped a lot with kind of large scale program management and stuff that I do now. And then I retired, and we went on to start iXpress Genes.
Wow. Okay, so tell us a little bit about where you were at mentally when you were in service.
Yeah.
Because I imagine, the few tours, in the Middle East can wreak havoc on your mind. You see a lot of things. There's probably things that you can't even talk about or share with people, but they're tucked away in your heart. Probably the things that you like journal about and your experiences over there. So give us like a little picture of that.
Yeah, I the my first tour was particularly poor. I don't know a better word. It was rough. So we were in Mosul, insurgency started kicking off, and yeah, I got pretty gnarly. And I was a very small team, and we worked pretty much like 24 hours a day, a couple hours of sleep here and there. So that just eventually added up. For me, it's interesting what we've done with iXpress Genes and this journey to prevent PTSD and trauma related disease in general. And I can follow the continuum among my military career. After deployment, depression started kicking in about 3-4 years in, and then just kind of continued to grow, and was really struggled with it. Went to therapy a couple times, but just nothing really seemed to really stick. And I really didn't have a motivation to do it, and or any like understanding of how to get through it. And then of course there's all the stigma in the military where you just don't talk about it because you don't want to get kicked out of family. Wanted to continue my career and continue to serve. And I think going in and getting mental health care at the time was, and probably still today, is incredibly stigmatic.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't until I started to retire that it got really bad. To the place where just perseveration of suicidal thoughts, And my life was pretty great. I mean, financially stable. My kids were great. The rest of my life was awesome. And I just couldn't get out of this cycle. And I
Mm.
ended up back in getting help in therapy and the exposure therapy. I'd worked some things through too that kind of started that exposure therapy. I didn't realize at the time was writing music. Eventually went back in kind of immersive for about a year in some pharmaceutical support and found my way on the other side of this thing. And I'm able to manage that really, really well now. So, part of my journey was really the motivation behind making sure that we have an opportunity to give a preventative aspect to other people.
Yeah. So, what is happening, if you can give us a brief overview, what is happening in your body when PTSD is present?
Yeah, I guess let me start with saying that like for some reason we have separated the brain from the body. There's like two separate medical systems, two separate insurance systems, or two separate everything. Shocker, the brain's attached to the body. And
Crazy. Yeah.
and so what we've found in our research, and the real exciting part of this is, I'm not a mental health care professional, but the people that we've worked with, whether it's in domestic violence, it's sexual assault, it's human trafficking, it's refugee displacement, it's combat veterans, mental health care providers are always like, yes, I'm so glad that we've known something like this, but it's so great to see that there is an opportunity in a data-driven way to look at it.
Hmm.
This really what it is, okay, you and I walk into the street, we're looking at our phones, and a car almost backs us over. We go through a fight or flight response, and what that is about, it's a cascade of hormones that cause all those things, right? Eyes dilate, heart rate to go up, all that. Immediately behind that is a second cascade of hormones that resolve the first. Now, we were meant to do that for about 30 seconds, right? Evolutionarily, like running away from a tiger or whatever. We
Right.
weren't meant to do this for years of our lives. So what we've found is, and what we believe is, some of those resolving proteins become immunogenic, meaning they create an autoimmune disorder. So now your stress is not resolving properly. And when you're in chronic stress, that autoimmune disorder creates inflammation. The inflammation creates oxidative stress that builds up in the brain over time, which creates that anxiety and depression that we see as the hallmarks of PTSD. The inflammation
Wow.
also causes a whole bunch of other disease that we don't recognize kind of publicly, that they're all connected. But you're more likely to have everything from rheumatoid arthritis to MS and ALS as somebody with PTSD, and they're all related. It's all the same autoimmune disorder, we believe.
Yeah, and I think something I've heard too, is your brain, treating your brain not as like an imaginatory place, but an organ. It's also an organ, right, in our body. And treating it like that, I think also it separates, because there is a stigma around mental health, right? You have people, that a generation of people that didn't talk about any of their emotions. And now you have a generation of people that all they do is talk about their emotions, that they can't even go to work because, work is too hard and I need a minute to sit down, right? So you have these two extreme groups, which every point of discussion has an extremist side of it, right? And so what you guys are doing is you're bridging the gap between the two, of like, no, there's beauty and benefit of, going to work and being able to compartmentalize and do things, but then there's also the beauty of getting getting it out and finding a way that we can live, in a society where there is trauma, where there is really hard things, where there is 9/11, where there is divorce, where there is chaos, where there is confusion. And, like you're saying, with that fight or flight response, we're not supposed to be in that space for a long period of time. And so I imagine that is what was taking a toll on you personally. So were you at a point in your life when you co-founded iXpress Jeans, were you with a buddy sitting at a table or at a bar talking about it? Like, how did you get to this point of like, I think that we should start a company that addresses this specifically?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. No. So, and to be, it's kind of amazing. So I was still in the military at the time, and I met Dr. Joe Ng, who's the co-founder. Joe was a professor at University of Alabama, Huntsville, and in 2010, one of his colleagues walked in with a 45 and killed several people in the conference room, and he was one of the survivors of that mass shooting.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, pretty brutal. I mean, to say the least. Well, as a scientist, he noticed this spectrum of resilience among his peers. People were getting really ill, and then other folks seemed to be a little more resilient. And he was like, there has to be some sort of immunological component to this. So he got a small grant, and he took about 100 veterans, had them screened for PTSD, and then took a whole blood and did what we call reverse RNA transcriptome analysis. All to say that basically looking at what is currently being dysregulated right now.
Hmm.
Found was there was 4 sequences that were 100% identical in over 90% of those that were exposed to trauma. And we mapped those back, and they actually map back to basically the variable region of the antibody. So all to say, yes, he was right. There was some immunological component. Now, fast forward, we have we started with some nonprofit work to try to raise money, and we started with awareness, and we're just looking at the research as a research collaborative. And then we realized we actually have a really effective, clinically helpful product, that a clinician can use just to speed to care. Unfortunately, there's so many issues, right? First, there's folks that say, listen, I wasn't in combat. I'm not there, right? And it doesn't matter, right? It's big stress, big trauma. It's just the physiology of your stress response. It has nothing to do with the severity. So, because we been doing this work now for about 5 years, I hear that so much. It's like, well, sure, I was in, a really abusive relationship for 5 years, but I didn't go to combat. And I'm like, well, sure, I was in combat, but I wasn't like, SOCOM, right? Somebody in SOCOM says, well, yeah, but I wasn't like a tier 1 guy, right? Like we all find justifications to downplay the impact of our trauma. Yeah, it's been kind of a wild journey.
Yeah. So I'm a clinician, and you're trying to pitch to me what iXpress Genes does. What is the process? How do they administer it to patients? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so we're in the course of regulatory approval, which we hope to have in February. But what we will have is just like kind of two scenarios. If you are part of a hospital system that has on-site phlebotomy, on-site blood collection, we would just be another blood test that you order, and blood gets shipped to us. We process it here in Huntsville, Alabama, and then deliver the test back, much like a cholesterol test,
Okay.
right? And the analogy of a cholesterol test is actually really helpful because in the 80s we thought we couldn't prevent heart attack or stroke. And then we made a simple biochemical test that allows for early intervention that now prevents heart attack and stroke. Same thing.
Yeah.
So on-site phlebotomy, the other version is you as a provider go on to our portal and you order a test that gets shipped to your patient. And at home, comfort of their own home, is a little button they put on their shoulder and basically push a little button and it fills a teeny little 1 milliliter vial of blood, and we drop ship it back FedEx to us, and we provide the results back to the provider. And what that test says is that there is chronic inflammation caused by stress that is left untreated will lead to poor outcomes. So both oxidative stress buildup, which leads to that anxiety, depression, and the potential of other disease states.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Over Never Out concert for the military and our veterans. This event will take place in Nashville, Tennessee on Friday, the 21st of February in 2025. At John Bon Jovi's bar in Nashville, Over Never Out will join other bands, businesses, and nonprofits to raise awareness of the suicide crisis amid the military and veteran communities. If you would like to learn more or sponsor this event, please visit the link in our episode description. Now, back to the show. And so where do you hope to see iXpress Genes? Do you want to see it a required test? Do you want to see it, like, what is kind of the vision for what you're up to?
So going back to the cholesterol test, right? Going in the 80s, the conversation was like, well, it's people's weight, it's their habit, they're not going to be able to fix
Hmm.
themselves. You fast forward to today, 40 years later, you and I we all take this test every year. It allows for our, primary care and our, medical staff to just like help us prevent disease. We want it to be as ubiquitous as that. Like, it's not a big deal. It's one more test, and it's we want to license it to the big lab companies and the big hospital systems where it's just a test you take, and all it is an indicator of like right now your body is doing bad things to you because of your past or because of your stress state currently. You need to prioritize that. You need to prioritize that stress reduction because it is hurting you.
Yeah,
Same
I
way
love
that
that.
double fisting, a couple burgers a day is probably hurting you as well.
Right, right.
Right?
Well, what I love about it too is you're really trying to get people into a space of mental freedom. And, when you're bound up in your mind, you can become useless. Your days become useless. You feel worthless. And then you just start to like it's you self-harm, whether it's ruminating thoughts or whether it's physically harming yourself. You get to this point because you just feel so like distracted and disgusted by your thoughts. And nobody is meant to live a life like that. Not one person. It could be, a military vet, or it could be, a rape victim. That, things that happen in our lives, whether they're voluntary or involuntary, and they create a response in us, and our responses are in a lot of ways involuntary. Our actions aren't like we can do a voluntary action, but as far as like what's happening internally, I don't tell myself to breathe. I don't tell myself to think. I don't tell myself to dream. This isn't like something I'm like every day signing up for, right? Like I can tell my hands to stop or to start writing, but I can't tell them not to go numb because of a stress response. And so what I love that you guys are up to is you guys are ahead of it, right? You're going, listen, like if we have a way to measure this and we have a way to kind of tip the hat that something might be going on in your body internally, there's going to be a lot of people that step into freedom. Because even in my own life, right, the first like response to a mental health issue is I'm going to go to a counselor or a therapist, right? Which talking therapy is very helpful because you're like, ah, I got it out there. I got it off my chest. I'm talking to a professional that knows how to respond to me, that knows the right questions to ask, to not engage with obsessions, to like whatever it is, right? You're sitting in that chair. But there's been a time in my life where I needed help chemically. And there is a stigma around it because you're like, what? Like, again, same thing. Life is good. I, got a roof over my head. I have, and then, like you said, we start to justify, we start to rationalize, well, I got it all. So I don't know why I'm upset. And that's not the magic wand you wave. There is a lot of beauty in gratitude, 100%. There's a lot of beauty in getting outside of yourself and helping others and serving others. Those are tried and true proven factors. But there's also stuff that's going on in our body that, just like if you had cancer, you would explore chemotherapy, right? You wouldn't just go talk about it
That's right.
to somebody. You wouldn't just go journal of gratitude. No, there is something inside of your body that should not be there that's torturing you that you can't get rid of unless you go chemo, chemical. Like, there's something going on. And so, what I love about iXpress Genes is that there is a way that a lot of us have never thought of, obviously, besides, you two and other people that are involved, of how can we get ahead of this and how can we bring awareness to it, but you're also bringing awareness and offering a solution. And a lot of people just like want an answer, especially when it comes to their mind. Like, can somebody please tell me? There is a level in any diagnosis, there is a level of relief when someone tells you what's going on, right? Like anything. I've been feeling really, really sick. Oh, I have a tumor. Oh, well, I don't like the fact that I have a tumor, but at least I know what's going on in my body because I thought I was crazy for
Yeah.
being this sick, right? And so I think it's very impressive, what you guys are doing. Are you guys partnered with any other you know, physicians or mental health providers or anything like that to help give resources to those that do take this
Yeah,
test?
so I before I answer that, I want to go back to something you said,
Hmm.
that it isn't, it isn't just veterans, right?
Right.
The cost burden of PTSD just in the United States is about $230 billion a year. 82% of that is nothing to do with the military. Right? That's mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles. There's enough trauma and stress to go around, and whether that's domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, first responders,
Car
medical
accidents. Yeah.
teachers. I
Yeah.
mean, shootings. Like it's there's a lot. So,
Hmm.
I would invite people to internalize that and not dismiss their experience. Um, and go back to your question.
Are you guys partnered with other like mental health providers or other resources that you can connect people to?
Yeah, sure. So we've started, we haven't been able to operate commercially. We will in February. We'll be launching. We've partnered with Wellstone, which is North Alabama's largest mental health care facility, and they've been really helpful as a research partner, and providing clinical feedback. They've been able to really help us out. But we've also partnered with the Veterans Administration in Birmingham. So we've started a large scale clinical trial there. And we're actually looking, and knock on wood, hopefully it'll be soon. We think we may have want to follow one that includes some, to include populations with like toxic exposure. So burn pit folks. Because, we think of trauma as mental,
Right.
but I mean, trauma is physical, trauma is chemical, trauma is, we think it's kind of all related. So we're excited to see what we can find out from those populations as well. But we have, can't say their names yet because we're still under NDA, but there's several large networks that have signed letters of intent to use our tests in their facilities when we do become commercial. So,
Yeah. Wow.
and I think that the early data has been really, really good. So we did a small study, and the false positive rate was zero, and the false negative rate we was very low, like below 5%. And what we found in those false positive or false negatives were that those were actually misdiagnoses of PTSD. And those physicians came back. We thought we had a model issue, that something was wrong with what we're doing. And the physician came back and said, no, no, no. This actually helps us discriminate between neurological depression and anxiety and trauma based.
Wow.
We've never done this before, right? We give everybody SSRIs or antidepressants with very mixed effect, right? And there's folks that, in their lives when they've been treated with SSRIs for years and years and years because it didn't work, right? Because the underlying issue was trauma and stress, as opposed to somebody who just needs a mood stabilizer or, needs just to be neurochemically balanced,
Right.
right? Two totally separate populations. We're kind of excited to explore
That's
that.
yeah, that's a huge enlightenment in that industry. And I think, misdiagnosis, it also can make you feel right. So take the common, I'm just going to use me as an example. Take the common person that has no medical background that just is wondering what's going on in their mind or, in their behaviors. And you go and you get misdiagnosed and then you start to kind of carry on along that label.
Mhm.
And when you're having an episode or when you're having a panic or anything like that, you're going, oh, this is just because I have bipolar, or this is just because I have schizophrenia, whatever it is, right? Those are extremes, examples. But, then you start to walk around with that basically adopted name, and a misdiagnosis, and that also can affect you mentally. And, there are what how we are labeled and how we are, it's the same thing of like you have a ton of titles, right? In your biography. But I'm sure there's one title that sticks out to you the most, like dad, right? Or like for me, it's like there's things that I have titles in, but I have more important ones that are mine. And so when people are walking around with a title that doesn't belong to them, you can start to feel crazy. You can start to, and I've seen this in my friends' lives. I've seen this, just on the internet. You don't have to go very far to look at somebody that is walking around with a name that they shouldn't have or a label that they shouldn't have, and it makes you feel low. And so I think it's really interesting that there is a difference between, trauma or neurological, and something I just learned. I'm learning a lot today. And so I just think it's really cool, and I'm excited for the other doors that are going to open and the other discoveries you guys are going to have
Yeah.
in order to change the narrative and to get rid of stigmas and to actually bring healing to people, because I think that this is people want answers, and you guys are able to offer them, just be a piece of the puzzle of some of their answers and some of their journeys. So I'm super excited for you. John, we are getting close to the end of our show here, but I
Yeah.
wanted to just touch a little on Over Never Out, what we're both a part of in February in Nashville, February 2025, February 21st, actually. And we get to be a part of something even bigger. Other just companies and organizations coming together to bring awareness of suicide prevention for veterans. So just give us like a little picture of how you guys are going to be involved and how you got involved.
Yeah, so we connected with Jason, and who invited us to be a part. We were delighted. I mean, that what a phenomenal opportunity to just have open, honest discussion with a lot of different voices from different perspectives.
Mm.
Um, we're excited to do it, for a lot of reasons. I think the approach of being able to bring folks together to have just a discussion, it's not a lecture, it's not being spoken to. We all know that we need to address veteran suicide, and it's not a pleasant topic, right? There's a lot of like humanity that a lot of people like to avoid, when it comes to these conversations. And I think the opportunity to have it in a very light and open forum, and then but also just have different voices, different organizations involved. I mean, I'm excited to see where it goes, and I know this is just the beginning of Jason's vision of growing a much larger event in the future too. So we're just excited
Yeah.
to be a part.
Yes, I am too. It's gonna be a blast. I think it's gonna be something to look forward to every year. I think there is just no limit to the connections and to just bringing more awareness and bringing more healing to those that have fought for our country, and for those that with your company as well. Like, you don't even have to fight for our company to get help, or for our country to get help. And so I think it's a really cool initiative that we're all going to get to be a part of come February. And this is the first installment of interviews of people I get to have the privilege to interview for this. We are at that point of the show, though, where I ask each guest to give the audience something to write down. So, John, what is your write it down?
Um, it's impossible until it's inevitable. I think we try to simplify our lives, by just creating like construct. And what I found on this journey is how many people have just said no because they don't want to bend their mind at all to the opportunity that things can be better.
Mm.
So we just think that the thing's impossible until like here we are sitting, it's an inevitable thing. For me, folks in this, especially in this business, have just said, well, I've been doing this for 30 years. And it's like, my man, iPhone wasn't even around 20 years ago. Like,
Right.
if that's your metric of expertise, you're using the wrong one. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, I love to rage against the machine a little bit, and we are going to change human health, and we're going to help people, before they need it, before they have a disease, and it's for us, it's no longer impossible. I mean, this is just inevitable.
I
So,
love it. Write it
thanks.
down with John Schmitt. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it. Thanks, bro.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Write It Down podcast. This podcast is a part of the 1513 network. You can catch a variety of shows on their website, 1513.com. If you enjoy listening to Write It Down, please subscribe, share with your friends, and if there's any ink left in your pen, write a review. For more content, follow the fun on Instagram by following at WIDPOD. That spells WIDPod. Super cool. Stands for Write It Down Podcast, but it's abbreviated to WIDPod. Anyways, thanks for listening, and we will catch you later.